All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're breaking down Walter Isaacson's absolute brick of a book, the 680-page authorized biography of, well, arguably one of the most polarizing figures alive today, Elon Musk. And look, this isn't just some dry timeline of events. We're treating this as a full-blown psychological case study. We're looking at what it actually takes to push the absolute boundaries of human achievement, and, just as importantly, the heavy toll that comes along with it. Right off the bat, Isaacson sets the stage with this incredible observation. He writes, "They can be reckless, cringeworthy, sometimes even toxic. They can also be crazy. Crazy enough to think they can change the world." So, it immediately forces us to ask a really fascinating question. Does world-changing innovation literally require a bit of madness? To figure that out, we're going to map out his life step by step. We'll start with the authorized biography itself, then unpack his engineering algorithm, delve into what's known as dark demon mode, examine the cost of chaos, and finally, wrap it all up with the package deal. Let's jump into part 1, the authorized biography. So it's really important to understand the lens we're looking through here. Biographer Walter Isaacson, you probably know him from covering historical giants like Steve Jobs or Leonardo da Vinci. He managed to secure just unprecedented access. He literally shadowed Musk for 2 whole years. And through that, he maps out Musk's life across 6 distinct eras. We've got his origins in South Africa, the founding days of Zip2 and PayPal, the brutal near-death experiences of SpaceX and Tesla back in 2008, scaling those massive companies, building out a whole empire with ventures like Neuralink, and of course, ending with the wild, chaotic acquisition of Twitter.
Moving right along to section 2, the engineering algorithm.
Okay, so how do you actually build reusable rockets when basically the entire world says it's impossible? Well, for Musk, it all boils down to a super strict 5-step checklist that he applies to literally everything. He just calls it the algorithm. Step 1, question every requirement. Step 2, and this one is absolutely crucial, delete parts. Musk actually insists that if you aren't forced to put parts back in about 10% of the time, you haven't deleted enough. Only after you do that do you move on to step 3, simplify. Then step 4, accelerate. And finally, step 5, automate. And his golden rule here? Never, ever automate a flawed process, because, well, that just gives you flaws a whole lot faster. Now, this whole algorithm builds directly on his absolute obsession with first principles reasoning. So instead of doing what the aerospace industry has, always done, Musk strips a problem completely down to its bare-bones physical and economic fundamentals. He actually used to tell his teams that all requirements are just recommendations. The only immutable rules out there are the laws of physics. So by stripping away all those assumptions, suddenly landing a reusable rocket backward doesn't seem like magic anymore. It just becomes a math problem. Which brings us to section 3, dark demon mode. You see, you really can't enforce that strict algorithm without applying just an immense amount of pressure. And that introduces us to demon mode. This is a state of extreme, round-the-clock urgency that Musk imposes on his teams during crises. Think back to the infamous Model 3 production hell. When massive bottlenecks happen, Musk literally moves his desk directly to the factory floor. We're talking sleeping right there alongside the line staff. He views extreme discomfort as a primary weapon against complacency. To him, artificial, totally unrealistic deadlines are basically the only way you can reach orbital velocity. And look, this relentless 24/7 frenzy, it absolutely works to unstick stubborn engineering problems. But man, it takes a massive human toll. There's this one former employee who actually quit from pure exhaustion, only to come back later, and he noted, "I decided I'd rather be burned out than bored." Still, Isaacson makes it incredibly clear throughout the book that this kind of sustained intensity just fundamentally degrades relationships and the well-being of anyone caught in its blast radius. Plus, when that intensity goes unchecked, it can really lose its focus. A lot of reviewers point to this concept called King's disease. It's basically when highly successful people become so arrogant from their past victories that they start to believe they can fix absolutely anything. And this perfectly explains Musk's sudden, massive pivot to acquire Twitter. He tried to apply that exact same demon mode and engineering algorithm to a social media platform, and, well, it resulted in mass layoffs and just total chaos. Because, as it turns out, human communication doesn't really bend to the laws of physics the way rockets do. That naturally leads us to section 4, the cost of chaos.
So, the financial press and the general public often tend to split Musk into two completely distinct figures. On one side, you have good Elon, right? The visionary building EVs, trying to literally colonize Mars, and pushing the frontiers of human technology. But on the exact opposite side, you have bad Elon, the figure who seems completely consumed by Twitter drama, posting crude emojis, and constantly wading into highly polarized, messy controversies.
But here's the thing, this volatility isn't just about social media drama anymore. It's actually bleeding into global conflicts. One of the absolute most explosive parts of the book raises a genuinely staggering question. Did Musk turn off his Starlink satellite network to intentionally thwart a Ukrainian drone attack on the Russian fleet in Crimea? The events surrounding this were incredibly contentious. So, initially, Isaacson's book claimed that Musk deliberately deactivated Starlink right during the attack. And as you can imagine, this sparked a massive international backlash, with officials outright accusing Musk of sabotage. But Isaacson later had to formally retract that claim. The corrected reality? Well, Starlink coverage in Crimea was actually already off due to geofencing. So when the Ukrainian military asked him to actively turn it on for the attack, he just refused. It's a pretty stark example of how a single CEO's decision now carries massive geopolitical weight. And frankly, how even a highly seasoned biographer can make a huge media misstep. And this immense scale of controversy, it deeply frustrates those who are closest to him. His own brother, Kimball, actually confronted him about this whole social media obsession. He bluntly told him, "I really don't give a shit about Twitter. It's just a pimple on the ass of what should be your impact on the world." You can see his family repeatedly trying to pull him back to his primary mission, which in their eyes is ensuring the survival of humanity. But the chaos also extracts a severe, really heartbreaking toll on his personal life. The book details his total estrangement from his oldest child, Vivian Wilson, who broke off all contact with him. Now, to be completely impartial here, we have to note that Vivian herself has spoken out very strongly against how she was portrayed in this biography. She actually called Isaacson's book genuinely defamatory. She argued that the author never even reached out to her, that he minimized her trans identity, and basically misconstrued their estrangement just to frame this neat villain origin backstory for her father's political shifts. All of this builds perfectly to our final section, the package deal. If you boil down the central thesis of Isaacson's massive 680-page book, it really comes down to one single thought. The intensity is not a bug alongside the achievement, it is the mechanism. Isaacson argues that you literally cannot surgically separate the genius Musk from the flawed Musk. Think about it. The exact same risk tolerance, that crazy urgency, the psychological wiring that somehow allows him to land rockets backward, it's completely inseparable from the traits that produce all the erratic tweets and workplace volatility. He is, for better or worse, a package deal. What's perhaps most surprising in all of this is that Musk himself actually seems to recognize it. When someone asked him about his regrets, he offered this surprisingly self-aware admission. He said, "My main regret is how often I stab myself in the thigh with a fork, how often I shoot my own feet and stab myself in the eye." He knows, on some level, that his incredible drive is deeply tied to a very self-destructive nature. He just fundamentally doesn't know how to operate any other way. Which brings us to the final, lingering thought of this explainer. Isaacson refuses to offer us a neat, simple judgment at the end of the book. Instead, he just lays out the massive achievements right alongside the wreckage and leaves the rest to us. So I'm going to leave you with this question to ponder. As Musk's companies continue to dictate the future of space travel, global communication, and green energy, is the sheer human cost of his operating style actually worth the technological leaps? It's a heavy question, and it's one we're all going to have to grapple with as we watch whatever he decides to build next.